We are live. Hello, Joanne. I just have to start by saying I love you. And you are like the most amazing fascia teacher I know. So I'm kicking off my 200-hour teacher training program this weekend. People can jump in either January or February. It's a bit of a flex start type of situation. But you are coming in to introduce the 200-hour teacher trainees to the concept of fascia as a whole body system. And I'm so excited to have you be the one to teach us the introduction to fascia, the basics of fascia. So will you talk about that for a bit? Why is fascia important?
Well, I would listen. You and I could perhaps sit and talk about this for about a year. I love your work too. I mean, like you, we're both structural integrators. We're both fascinated yoga teachers. We're both very dedicated to an holistic approach to body, mind, and being.
Absolutely.
And when we say being, we go on to the being in the body, the us that animates this stuff. And as you know, it's been so great having you in Dundee and John Sharkey's dissections, where we've come from this position, not how can we break the body down and divide it into its individual bits, nor even put them together as bands, but how does it actually work as a whole? Because as we both know, when your yoga student comes into the classroom, you can have learned everything you know about yoga and everything you know about anatomy and everything you know about life and so on. And what actually takes place in the room is something other than that, or as well as that, or inclusive of that. And there is something absolutely crucial in a yoga teaching context of making that environment safe, of feeling safe in that environment as the teacher, and of instantly facilitating that sense of safety and that sense of wholeness and that sense of respectful, interactive, intercommunicating relationship that allows people to be present, to be themselves the way they are. I know you agree with me. I think that's an act of grace.
Yes.
And I think we have to facilitate that in advance. Now, the way we're usually trained, that is largely considered to be very separate from anatomy. Here's the thing for me. We learn anatomy in the intellectual domain. We learn the names of the asana and the postures in the intellectual domain. And if we learn them in Sanskrit, we have to remember them in the intellectual domain.
For sure.
When we are animating and practicing and experiencing and doing yoga, we're in a completely different experience or atmosphere or time zone because we have to be present.
Yeah, it's experience.
And we don't leave our minds outside and come in and bring our bodies in, with our hearts, with our kids or families or whatever. The whole shtick comes together. And then we have that other thing, that invisible sense of grace, of beingness that comes with the whole show.
Totally.
And for me, the fascia is the unifying fabric of the form that plays a part in every one of those things.
Absolutely.
And so when we first introduce it, the first thing that happens, this, we've done how many courses now? The first thing that happens is people start from the category of anatomical structures.
Right.
So we start there and we look at the muscles and the bones, because that's what's moving the movement apparatus, the locomotor system.
Totally.
Or is it?
Well.
And so then we get into what I call the domain of intellectual factions. Those who believe, those who don't believe. And I just had one of my class participants telling me about a course they've just done where a professor of anatomy was telling them how they do cadaveric dissection to demonstrate movement through muscles attached to bones, and of course bless her heart, this participant had been in my course. And she said, what about the fascia? And this professor said, no, that's what we scrape out of the way in order to see what we need to understand about the locomotor system.
Yeah.
Now,
exactly.
Let's not make the professor wrong. No. Let's just say that what we're learning, and we'll do this in the course, is the history that put us under a magic spell. And it is a spell, Christine, it's a spell.
Yeah.
That we are collectively under the influence of. That the removed tissue cogently explains through being removed how we move. No. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay, I have to jump in and say one little thing.
Yeah.
Because often when I start with fascia, it's like, the question will be, what is fascia? And the answer is always, it's connective tissue. And I kind of, in a way, don't like calling fascia connective tissue because to me, immediately it paints the picture that I am separate pieces and parts, and here's a tissue that's going to stitch me together. And what I'd rather paint is this idea that there's one thing that has multiple folds and turns and spaces, but it's all one thing that then individualizes and specializes out of that one thing. So I don't know what, like, we even start with like, what is fascia?
Fascia is connective tissue. But the thing that we start to bring in, and we'll do this in the course, we'll go into this very clearly so people are unequivocally clear about the spell that we're all under, this collective spell, that this connecting tissue can be removed and leave us with the components of everything else, because that's a myth as well.
Yeah, for sure.
So let's imagine we had a house, and we can do this now in our preparation. Bear in mind that the course takes the time it takes, because it takes that time. I know I'm stating the obvious, but it's a koan in its own way. If you had a house, imagine you've got a house in front of you and it's built of bricks and cement. You're almost saying, well, if I take the cement away, I know the house will fall apart, don't worry about that, but the bricks are the components. Well, fascia takes us one level below that, in the sense of one of the original building materials of the whole house is sand. And sand is treated a particular way to make cement. It's treated a particular way to make it into bricks. It's mixed with clay to make brick. It's mixed with something else to make cement. It's treated differently to make glass. But sand stroke other components of earth,
beautiful,
other basic building materials, from which we can man-make various things that we organize in a structure called a house in all sorts of ways. Now, let's go back to fascia.
Love it. As
an embryo, we begin as a structure. There's never nothing. That, we start as a conceptus.
Right.
And that fabric of that form is essentially fascia.
Absolutely.
And then we start looking at its properties, its characteristics, its natures. And what we're actually doing is getting underneath our school knowledge, our, I don't know what you have in the US, but we have something called key stage learning, and we have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and so on, up to grade 8, 9, somewhere like that. You go to secondary school. I don't know how it works in the States, but it's very similar, I'm sure. And we all learn how muscles are attached to bones and they move the joints in certain ways, and And it's not that we're coming opposite that with a new argument. It's that we're saying, yeah, that's true. That all happens. And what connects that, and what disconnects that, and what distinguishes that, and what allows that to become is a precursor to muscle, and a precursor to bone, and a precursor to spatialization and specialization. And what's starting to happen, partly through the research and partly through the combined web being woven internationally by practitioners, therapists, researchers, and scientists all around the world, and it's great, big, huge, as you know, is this web of recognition that the fascia to the human body is cellulose to a plant, and all flowers and trees are made of the same basic material, and we are all made of the same basic material. And we're not quite the same as fauna and flora, but the nature's principles are so closely connected and so economically designed that it's almost as if we can afford to rest a little in the man-made construct of constructing how we move. We're actually being asked to dismantle that and restore our original faith in ourselves as beings before the history that took place that separated us from that origin. And that's what we start off with on next Sunday. I'm so excited, I can't wait, because it's one of my favorite bits, because Leonardo da Vinci's in it. And it's just the history that brought us under this spell.
Right.
And I mean, we even know who spellcasters are.
Yeah. So the paradigm we're in now, or the model we are, I mean, my son's just starting his massage therapy course in university right now, right? So the model that we have now, human anatomy, human physiology, kinesiology, is what you're going to take us through of how this model came to be, in removing this tissue in order to reveal these pieces and parts, and then go back and try to piece it all together to figure out how it works. And
you've got it. I mean, the whole thing, Christine, we've worked together for ages, and you know me. I don't teach bits. I teach the logic that means whatever bits you come across, you can give context to.
Well, and it's not to say that bits aren't important. Like, the bits are hugely important. It's just this 180-degree flip, right? Like, it's seeing the continuity first, or it's seeing the seamlessness or the oneness first, and then seeing the folds and turns and specializations and individualizations second. Then those bits and pieces and parts actually make more sense, because they're out of the continuity rather than removed from it.
Exactly. And we're not making the parts wrong. This is the thing. I think we're
not making the parts wrong.
We're not making the parts wrong. We're making the significance of what joins those parts much higher. We're changing the perspective. We're changing the proportional ratios with which we bestow what I call bioemotional integrity or bioemotional intelligence. And this is really crucial, because as a yoga teacher, you are basically saying, let's be frank. How can we have you feel better and move better? That's what we're there for. That's what we're doing.
That's what the yoga teacher is all about.
You're not bringing enlightenment to the world, and that might be a byproduct. That's great. But personally, I don't want that responsibility. I think enlightenment is a very personal journey. I am assisting the people in my classroom to hopefully feel better and very definitely move better. Whatever that is for them. Now, I can't move as well as some of the people I teach. I'm not saying it's about being as good as me. What I'm saying is, can we find a logic from which we can self-regulate, self-organize, and interact in our classrooms such that we can help our students move better? How can we do that safely? And one of the ways of doing that safely is do your homework, learn the parts, but recognize the context in which those parts arise. And you know that by the end of this course, what we hope is that, and I'm talking about the whole course.
The whole 500 hours.
The whole 500 hours is that the end of that 500 hours, people can look back and recognize the incremental stages they've made towards the difference by that time they've practiced and know they are making to the people they're working with, as well as themselves. And it's a self-regulating, self-perpetuating web feedback. Hello, what's this? A self-perpetuating web of feedback.
And it's, you know, it's so, I just want to give a really practical example too, because when I came to fascia, it was a result of Googling my symptoms, and I couldn't walk, I couldn't sit, I couldn't move when I found fascia. So I realized early on in my chronic pain journey, that the fascia was part of my solution. I just didn't understand why yet. But fast forward 5 years and I am, summiting mountains, and I'm moving, I'm sitting. All those things have been brought back to functional integrity through just studying fascia, learning how to move, learning micro movements, learning how to collaborate with my nervous system, learning how to be in healthy relationship with my body. And all these things kind of happen as you go down this rabbit hole of the fascia paradigm. You start to see in oneness and wholeness and continuity, and and everything is about relationship. And that's where it brought me. So and other people will say the same who've taken the program, that they were in chronic pain and now they're not. So how does that happen? It's this, sometimes it's hard to bring it down to the practical levels, but it really does inform the body how to move in a way that's appropriate for the individual.
Precisely, and congruent for their way. And we recognize fascia types. We recognize fascial rules or laws of how the matrix works that evolve our previous thinking. So we're not saying, well, we are saying some things are wrong. That's not true. I mean, like the idea that biomechanically we are a system of levers. That's just wrong.
Yeah, like the tree is a system of levers.
It's not a system of levers. No, and there are no levers in nonlinear biologic forms. We know that, but we get to that after 100 hours or so. And it's not a popular vote, but it is a spell.
Yeah.
Because literally the definition of a lever and the definition of a moving being are such that there can be no levers in nonlinear biologic forms. And by the fact that we're living, we're nonlinear. We're just nonlinear. We abide by nonlinear rules.
Yeah.
And so that's a thing. That's a great big huge thing. And it's interesting because when you get down to something so physical and obvious, and you've seen me on Facebook arguing with people going, prove it. Well, you can't prove the negative. First of all, science isn't about proof, it's about questions.
There's a lot of resistance to it, though.
There's a lot of resistance, and science is about disproving. And Dr. Levin, bless his heart, has spent the last 40 years trying to disprove biotensegrity. Another thing, I know we haven't got to that yet. But with fascia, as far as fascia is concerned, the idea that all fascia does is connect the muscles to the bones so that they can move as levers is nonsense. That's a spell.
And I have to jump in and say, this piece of data may be wrong, so correct me, but Dr. Levin is in his 80s, yes?
87 or 8, yeah.
And is he still doing the one-arm push-ups?
He's still doing one-arm push-ups. Last birthday,
so I mean, his whole embodiment is a living testament.
As an orthopedic surgeon, he didn't get to pontificate about this stuff. He got to do it.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean you can't prove by one. That's not it. I mean, we're talking about an international thing with top surgeons and researchers and scientists. There's people, gold standard research involved in this. I'm not sitting here making claims. I just happen to be one of the storytellers who understands it and gets to share it, which is my passion.
Yeah, and I mean, the making claims thing. I think that in my program, I do provide research. I do provide papers because we are going to go to our students and make claims. So it's nice to have those papers on your laptop to say, well, here's a little bit of research on this, and there's so much more that we don't know yet. But aside from that part of it, just experientially, learning how to move in a way that's going to enhance whatever it is that you're already doing. So for me, it's enhanced the ability to climb mountains because I'm able to use my body as this whole system instead of thinking of isolating parts. There's something that happens when you understand biotensegrity and moving from that attitude, from that approach. It has just, it's a game changer for athletes and even just not even for athletes, but just for people that's it.
Well, what's so important about what you just said, Christine, and it really is, it's very important, is that what it takes for you to have what's needed for you to climb a mountain is very different to what it would take for me.
Exactly.
So my thing was, when I gave birth to my son, I couldn't lift the baby carrier, you know, that you lift and put in the car so that you can safely travel with them. I couldn't lift it. And I, postpartum, I couldn't even spell it. And I wasn't a yoga teacher or anything. This is way back. And I went to a physio, and they put me on basically a rack. They wrapped my hips with a band and wrapped my ribs with a band, and then opened the table I was on to stretch my spine. And I don't think I've ever been in such unholy pain in my entire life.
Yeah.
And then I thought, hang on a second, this is, they used to hung, draw, and quarter people doing this. What the hell is going on here? And I say this often, it was the grit that stuck in the throat of this oyster to turn into a pearl, because I then went in search of a way of physically making this work so that I could lift things. And that little baby was 26 last week. And it's been my life's work since then, is finding out what it takes for me to be able to lift something without hurting day to day, what it would take for me to climb that summit with you. I'd love to. My God, next time I'm in Canada, I'm so in for that. We're just
taking you somewhere.
But my practice will look very different to yours.
Yeah, for sure.
So what I'm saying that for is that learning about fascia and biotensegrity is not learning a set of rules that we then apply to everybody because we can.
Yeah.
It is literally learning the language of fasciological wisdom in the body, such that you can teach it to the people you're teaching, such that they can be awake to it because they're listening to their own instinct. And that takes something more than information, and it actually takes something more than performance. It takes transformation. And what I know how you work, that's why we work together, is because what we're interested in is creating a facility in which people can transform themselves rather than giving them the information to go away and do what we told them to, because that doesn't work.
Yeah, it's really a perspective shift in the way that we approach movement. And so in that, so we can't really give out rules, because this particular approach is an inside out approach. The approach is we're giving students the ability to go inside their body and find their rules, their set of rules that are appropriate for their body. But so in a way, it's a little bit harder to teach. But
it's hard to teach, but it's not arbitrary. I was having this discussion with John Sharkey the other day, because we were talking about how, in a lot of the work about the fascia, we talk about the fascia not only as being all pervasive in the body, but being the largest sensory organ of the body, which some people consider to be complete nonsense, but there's a lot of research that shows that it's, serious research. And if the body is a sensory organ, then it changes the way we see the nervous system. If the fascia is a sensory organ, it changes the way we see the nervous system. But this is where I'm saying it's not arbitrary. This is not about, my fascia feels, and it might be different from yours, but I'm doing it anyway. No. The body has systems. The body has hierarchies. The body has appropriate ways. And what we teach people how to do is recognize what I call the archetypal movement signature that someone brings to the table. Now, I was saying with John, if you sever the subcutaneous nerve, the biceps isn't going to work.
Right.
You can do what you like. Robert Schleiper's written articles saying that the nervous system is not like a telephone cable wiring system. No, it may not be. It may be something much more than that. But it doesn't throw out the baby with the bathwater by saying that fascia is the largest sensory organ of the body. What it does is it changes how we describe and the language that we use to discuss the structure of the nervous system or the effects of the nervous system. And because you're so engaged in how we integrate and assist clients in working safely, and your work integrates with trauma work, this becomes really important, because what it gives us is a completely different perspective on sensitivity.
Yes. Oh my gosh, yes.
And that's profound, because in that moment you discover that the anatomy that you did separately is, on the yoga teacher training, so it's 10%. Just get that out of the way, learn the names of everything and get on with it. Okay, here's the analogy. gives you the names of the parts, but it doesn't tell you how they work. And if these are watch parts, you're no nearer telling the time.
Right.
And in yoga, we want all of that. We want to know the names of the postures. We want to be able to do the postures. We want to know the purpose of the postures. But then we also want to just sit there and experience freedom from the physical body to enter what yoga calls the energetic body, or the vital energy body, or the pranic body, or the subtle body, or whatever name you give whichever level. How do we do that? Well, we do that through the breath. Well, how does the breath work? Well, what's the common denominator to all of that? Mm-hmm. And I think, without going into any more detail, that's the keystone to what we're saying, the common denominator. And what I love is it brings the anatomy and the philosophy and the lifestyle and the ethics and the practicum and the techniques together in a web. And that is the key for me in the value of this work. And I've been teaching it for a long time now, and I see this over and over again, is people literally exhaling that they haven't got to learn 1,000 separate names and then go out there into a wilderness and work out how to put those parts together. Yeah. They learn the wholeness and the why of that wholeness and the logic of that wholeness, and then it can be expressed in any of the parts.
Yeah, this is so huge. And what you said a few minutes ago about sensitivity this is just so, it's so huge, because when we're in a harsh environment and we're trying to pick up a instrument that's this sensitive, it becomes very difficult to hear it with all that noise. But when we can create an environment that is safe, we can get quiet enough to really focus on this instrument that is, like you talk about, the finely tuned instrument that we can hear through movement. But that environment of safety is so relevant. Otherwise, we'll just protect ourselves. So tapping into something sensitive, I think, is just, it's so important to do that with that trauma-informed, that creating that environment of safety first. Not sure if that makes sense.
No, it makes sense, but it's got to, I think it works best when it's physically recognized, emotionally recognized, and it's in the atmosphere. So the body, the mind, and the being are all congruent, so it doesn't become separate things. Yeah. So you're learning your anatomy to make sense of the safety that you're creating for the nervous system of the being that's in the room.
Right, yeah. We can learn polyvagal theory and trauma theory and have a sense of how all of that works, but it's more about the experience at the end of the day of being able to drop in.
And what has fascia to do with the vagus nerve? Loads. Yeah. So it's like, you know what I'm saying? We weave quite, but that doesn't mean that it's a complex picture. I think the magic is staying respectful, that you're learning new basics. I'm very respectful. My basics are expanding every day, and it's that we take those basics and then we feel safe asking our questions, and then we can manage our curiosity. And I think that's the most precious gift of any yoga class, is that each day we bring ourselves new to the mat and ask, how are you? Ask yourself, how are you? Be the witness, which is what, of course, we're learning in yoga, is to witness and observe, how am I today? And you could say, how is my fascial matrix, or how is my biotensegral intelligence, or how is my biceps? You could, do you know what I mean? You can see it through whatever window or lens you want to see it through. But what the fascia somehow does for me, it's very much an interface of what we call the spiritual, energetic, invisible aspect of animation, and the form that we animate to express that.
Yeah, I mean, even just on the symbolic level, it's like the non-dual tissue of the body. So even just like when we go into spirituality and we go into what it's like to abide in the non-dual state, and then we look at fascia as like an actual physical manifestation of that. It's
exactly
just
what it is.
Symbolically, it's like, wow.
What it is. It's not bones and muscles. It's called the Cinderella tissue of orthopedics. Robert Schleich, quote from the Stecco's book. It is. You know, this is what I wrote in my book, that the muscles and bones don't get to do a damn thing without Cinderella holding them together and keeping their act together. And it's a triumvirate, and it's the holy trinity of the body. And but it doesn't work on its own. It doesn't work without the other two, and the other two don't work without it.
And
the relationship gives us a holy trinity. Yeah, literally. And after all, that's what yoga is about, right? Ida Pingala. And when they're in balance, the balance of Sushumna arising is a neutral expression of balance. It's not an in order to. It's not when she's right and he's right, then they can be friends. It doesn't work like that. It's already a thing that, when balance, creates a third thing that is the balanced unification of that form. And that is yoga. That is yoga. It means unifying.
Beautiful. You said something really important a few minutes ago that I think is just worth highlighting, that when you're safe enough, you can get curious. And I think that is so important, that we have the ability to arrive in a state of being where we can get curious and experience the tissue, experience the nervous system, experience my state of being, and then move from that state of being and experience movement in that way. So
without knowing what it is. I'm not, it's exactly that, and it's not an intellectual process. So I'm really hoping in the teacher training that we could bring people aware. I'm not saying don't study it intellectually, of course, and we'll give you all the information you need.
Yeah, it's both and. Yeah.
It's how do we experience it distinct from understanding it, naming it, and analyzing it? How do we experience it right now? Right now.
Yeah.
And what are the cumulative effects of that experience over time? And at the end of 500 hours, you'll be a yoga teacher, so you'll know.
And it brings you to embodiment, and that's where we get to have the experience of just really living in a body and moving from presence. And it's so powerful to be able to do that. I'm so glad you're joining us. It's an honor to have you as a member of our faculty.
It's an honor to be there. Thank you, Christine. I really appreciate you asking me whenever you did. It's great. And it's so nice to be doing the whole group from the beginning.
Yes. I'm so excited.
You know how emotional I get. I love it that I don't mean I'm emotional in my teaching. I mean, you know how I get kind of attached to.
Yeah, I know, right? Like the 300 hours that just graduated are like, they're like our little.
I can't help it. I mean,
I'm small.
I know, it's like, I watch you on Facebook with Cody, and because I lost my dog last year, and I just can't even tell you how much I miss her. And I just look at, that's not anything to it. It's just that I'm sitting there thinking, what is this emotional detachment thing? I mean, what am I, a Jedi? Give me a break. I care. And, it's like part of it. And you can't help it, because you do care that people get it. But you care.
Yeah, for sure.
For their highest good. Not like, I want you to get it my way because I said that. It's not a possessive caring. It's a very.
You want them to be well. It's like it's like this desire for others to be well. Yeah. So you're kicking us off on the whole topic of fascia, and eventually we'll get to biotensegrity, but we'll start with fascia on Sunday. And then in the 300 hour, we'll get into biotensegrity, which is kind of like a level up. So exciting. So I'm so excited.
See the shelves behind me, but there's wall-to-wall tensegrity.
I love it. I love it.
So it's like, I redid my living room, so I've got a set of shelves with all my tensegrity toys on them, because I couldn't bear them being away in boxes. And it's like a, I don't know what it is. It's like a what? It's like a thing. It's a passion. But it comes from Leonardo da Vinci. I originally started as an artist, and my training in art and art history took me to Leonardo da Vinci, and I've never, ever stopped being in love with his work. And there's so much more to it. Oh my God, there's so much to it.
Well, and like from a Hakomi point of view too, as the somatic trauma therapy that I do, it's all about holding conflicting thoughts or conflicting emotions in this space of loving presence at the same time. And when I started learning biotensegrity, I was like, oh, this is so cool. I'm doing like emotional tensegrity work with people. It's kind of like what John says about, looking at the parallels of these principles are everywhere on every level throughout all of nature. So of course it's there on the emotional level too, and the mental level too, and the physical level too. So cool.
All right, my darling. Well, I have to go, and I love you, and I can't wait to work with you, and I'll see you on Sunday.
I will see you on Sunday. I'm so excited. All right.
Big love. Bye.